Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. My guest today is Elizabeth Sherman. Elizabeth has many qualifications in the realm of wellness and is a master certified health and life coach. She helps women in perimenopause and menopause manage their symptoms as well as other stressful demands that accompany this season of life. She also has her own podcast, Done with Dieting, which offers tools and skills to feel good around food and make smart choices more easily. In this episode, we discuss a later-in-life diagnosis of ADD and ADHD, what this looks like to others, navigating a new way of identifying later in life, and communicating this with the people around you. We also talk about complicated relationships with food and how to address what may be lifelong beliefs now that we really need to fuel ourselves optimally. Plus, Elizabeth shares some really illuminating insights into the relationship so many women have with pleasure and how to find pleasure in healthy habits. Would you be able to start by telling everybody a little bit about yourself, where you live, your background, so they get a sense of you?
Yeah. So my name is Elizabeth Sherman. I am a life and health coach for women in midlife. And a lot of times people ask me, what does midlife mean? And so generally it's women who are in perimenopause, menopause. And I think that something that I've been thinking about a lot recently is how many demands are on women in this age or in this stage of life. It actually is. There are so many things that are changing. And from the way that
Elizabeth, lovely to
society
see you again.
perceives us,
Thank you
to the way that we perceive ourselves,
podcast. I thoroughly
our
enjoyed
bodies
it. So I'm
obviously
delighted
are
that you are able to
changing,
join
going
me.
through perimenopause and menopause. But then also our family structures are changing, and our relationships are changing with friendships, because many women are having children who are then moving off into college, and they're no longer retaining those relationships out of convenience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The friends of other parents of their kids. And so there's a lot of change that's going on at this stage of life. So generally, I work with women in the areas of eating, physical activity, sleep, stress management, and body image. And then I also help women through all of those modalities to create the set of lifestyle habits that are right for them so that they can look and feel their best. Because so many of us grew up where we did not have a good relationship with food, exercise, sleep. And so we've continued to have these bad habits. And now we're kind of paying the price. And so really being able to unlearn some of the things that we learned as younger women so that we can take better care of ourselves and then move into retirement and have aging and longevity, which is what so many women want. So that's a little bit about me. Oh, I didn't answer. I live in Mexico. My husband and I moved here 6 years ago. And we have just recently, within the last 8 months, moved into our dream home we built. And so it's just lovely. That's about it right now.
That's a transition in itself, moving to Mexico and building your own home. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a huge culture shock. I did not prepare myself for it.
I wouldn't even know where to begin. Having renovations done or building work done on an existing house is struggle enough, never mind.
Exactly, where you know the language and you know how everything works. Yeah.
There is a lot to unpack from all of that you do, what with the transitions that we all go through physically in our lives. So with children, certainly my youngest is about to go to secondary school, which is elementary school in the States. Is that right? She's 11.
So that would probably be like junior high, almost high school. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And then my eldest, lots of her friends are turning 18. She's about to be 17. She's younger for her year. So finishing school, yes. And then they're all planning university or college or a year off or traveling. So those dynamics are all shifting very rapidly. Lots of people have elderly parents, and many women these days are having children later. So actually, when many of us had them in our 30s, and certainly our parents might have had them in their 20s, lots of people I know are now beginning their families in their 40s. So big transitions there. And then when you add on to that, the physical changes that we're going through, which then have the mental shifts that occur. I mean, it's layer upon layer upon layer. So we will come back to that in a moment. First of all, I have to ask you, where are you in terms of perimenopause or menopause?
I am in menopause. I completed that. Oh gosh, I want to say like 2 or 3 years ago. So I crossed over, and it's been an interesting process. I have done a lot through diet and exercise to manage my symptoms. I know that one of the questions you're going to ask me is like, what am I struggling with right now? And it's so fascinating, like something I've been really frustrated with. Well, and let me back up for a minute, talk about my own experience a little bit. I recently have come to the conclusion that I have ADD, which many women in midlife, menopause, perimenopause have this revelation also. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was a teenager, young teen, like maybe about the age of your daughter. And dyslexia never really fit for me. Like that diagnosis just never really fit for some reason. But they didn't really think at the time that I was a kid that, because I'm 54 years old right now, they didn't really have that diagnosis of ADD and ADHD when we were kids, that it was just the hyperactive boys, right?
Yes.
And I was always cast as a daydreamer by my teachers. And so anyway, I've come to the conclusion that yes, I have not gotten a formal diagnosis yet, because I've gotten really good at creating processes and systems that make up for my symptoms. Except for recently, I cannot remember things to save my life. Like I will go into my phone to, like, for example, schedule a client call and all of a sudden get distracted with Facebook and then be like, oh my God, what was I doing? Like I have no concept. I will walk into another room and literally forget to do that. So like the systems that I have in place to remember to do things, to put things on my task list, are, my memory is just going so rapidly that I don't even have time to put them on my task list, because by the time I open my phone, I'm completely distracted. So that's where I am right now. And I don't know how to get through that.
I sympathize from the other side. So this is a massive sidebar, but one I find really interesting. My eldest daughter has been diagnosed with ADHD just over a year ago. So I've been trying to learn as much about it as possible. A doctor recently included in the list of menopausal symptoms ADD and ADHD. Now, I disagree with that. I don't believe it is a symptom. However, having spoken to psychiatrists and chemists, pharmacists who specialize in ADHD, they have had so many more midlife women being diagnosed with it since the pandemic, suggesting that maybe they've had more time to reflect, more time to think, and it's become more prevalent. And just as you said, when we were growing up, ADHD was the 5-year-old boy throwing Lego all around the room, running circles in the classroom, whereas the girls had the hurricane, the Lego on the inside, but nobody seemed to know. And so what you're describing with your strategies, and certainly my daughter does the same, you've all learnt to mask your symptoms and live with them because they haven't been recognized. So that learning, even if it's not a professional official diagnosis, that must be a transition in itself. Do you feel intrinsically within you that you definitely have ADD and this is now your curve of learning?
Yeah, I really do. And I think that what is really interesting is I was talking to my brother just recently. He came for a visit and I said something about having ADD. And he looked at me like I was kind of wrong about that. And and the reason why he looked at me, not that my experience is bad and that I am not empowered to talk about my experience, but he was looking at everything that I've accomplished because I am very high functioning, that I don't think he was able, that I don't fit into that box of what ADD or ADHD looks like for him. And so for him, he was like, I don't see that at all, because our impression of someone who has ADD or ADHD is that they're a complete hot mess. I feel like a complete hot mess on the inside, but I get a lot done. And the other aspect of that is communicating it with my husband, because it's something that I've recently become aware of. And he gets really frustrated with me when, like, for example, thinking about the inattentive, he will ask me to do something and I will 100% intend to do it. But if it's not on my to-do list, I will completely forget about it. I won't make time. And when I'm focused on work or I'm focused on something else, it is the last thing that I'm thinking about. So he gets frustrated with me because his impression of that is, this is important to me. I've asked you to take care of it. So therefore you think that I'm not important, which is not true, but it's just part of the ADD. And like really explaining that to him has been an experience. And I don't even know that he's 100% on board with the fact that I have ADD right now, but at least I'm, opening up the conversation for it.
I think that's one of the most important things, and certainly something I've found valuable, and my daughter, is talking to other people, certainly women actually, who have ADHD or ADD, so that I, as somebody who, I don't believe I do, I've got quirks, but I don't think I have ADHD. So I need to learn how people work. And it is, just to be very, very clear, because I've also heard this recently, not a disability, but how it works. Because I actually think it is a superpower, and you have incredible, that hyper focus. Oh my God, it's amazing. When you're laser focused on something, that is just absolutely fantastic. But understanding how it works so I can build a better relationship with my daughter and understand why she has or hasn't done something, particularly when it's something as basic as, all your clothes are on the floor for the last week. I need to wash them. Why hasn't that happened? It's a tiny thing, but understanding executive function and the hurdles that can present, then life is so much better. And then for her as well, to be able to communicate it, it's fascinating and something I really want to learn more about, and that I wish people would talk about more, so that it doesn't have a stigma of disability or a symptom or a disease. It is neurodiversity that is to be wonderfully celebrated.
Yeah. It's really cool seeing, neurodiversity coming out as just, hey, we're all different. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back then to the transitions, because there are so many. Often, having spoken to a number of people, and myself included, part of the mindset shift starts with anxiety and potentially depression. Also, two things which sometimes go hand in hand with ADHD.
Yeah.
How do you support clients who come to you through this phase, both at home and at work?
Anxiety and depression can be caused by 2 or 3 different reasons. Okay. Part of the life coaching that I do with my clients is I help them to uncover what's called the think, feel, act cycle. The think, feel, act cycle is the idea that everything that we do or we don't do is because of an emotion that we currently have or an emotion that we think we're going to have when we do the thing. And the reason that we have that emotion is because of a thought that we have in our head. So let me put this into practice. So because I work in health and wellness, oftentimes people will say, why did I eat that brownie? Or why did I eat 3 brownies? Right. And so we have to figure out, okay, what was it that you were feeling at the time that you ate the first brownie? So were you feeling anxious? Or were you feeling bored? Were you just going into the kitchen to busy yourself with something, asking like, what is there to do here? What's entertainment? And so when we desire, we see the brownie and we're like, oh, that would taste really good. We have the emotion of desire. And so we eat the brownie. And then subsequent things happen. But keeping that as an isolated topic, the idea that pops up into our head is, oh, there's a brownie. That brownie looks delicious. I want to eat it, which then creates the emotion of desire and wanting in us, which then creates the action of eating the brownie. Okay. Same thing, similar topic would be, why don't I get myself to exercise? Well, if you're sitting on the couch and you're supposed to go for a walk, it takes effort to go for a walk. And so your brain is probably thinking, gosh, that's going to take a lot of time and effort, and I don't want to be hot and sweaty. And so there's a lot of discomfort that goes along with exercise. So your brain is already processing, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. So we have the emotion of resistance. And so that's what makes us blow off the exercise. So that's the think, feel, act cycle. Now, that being said, not 100% of our emotions of anxiety and depression are caused by our thoughts, especially for women in midlife. What can happen a lot of times is our brains will just fire off neurons that make anxiety and depression feelings, sensations in our body, which then we think, we interpret, we judge as being wrong. And so when I feel anxious, when I feel depressed, because they're not, I mean, negative emotions are really uncomfortable. And so therefore, we try to do everything we can to avoid feeling those emotions. And so we judge the emotion, the anxiety, the depression, the fear, the shame, the worry as bad. I shouldn't be feeling that. And when we try to stuff it down, what happens is it lasts longer. And oftentimes, when we're then in a relaxed state, it'll come back with a vengeance. So if you're having panic attacks, it's possible that if you experience the emotion, and what I guide my clients through, to answer your question directly, is I guide my clients through something called a body scan. And so what it is just noticing and naming what are the physical sensations of that emotion in our bodies. And I think that with anxiety and depression, we don't want to allow ourselves to actually fully feel the sensations of that emotion in our body because we're afraid that we're going to never get out of it. But just like motivation and inspiration are fleeting emotions, anxiety and depression are also emotions that aren't going to be stuck with us forever. And so, really allowing my clients the tools to be able to feel the emotion, go through it 100%, and then process it so that they can, quote unquote, get over it faster. Now, that being said, there are days when I just wake up and, not related to a thought, I have anxiety. I don't really struggle with depression. Then it's like, okay, you know what? Like having a big old purse, we're going out to work anyway. We're doing this anyway. And we're just going to feel anxious at the same time. And it's okay because we're not judging the emotion.
That is often where a lot of the difficulty comes, in judging the emotion and feeling bad that you do feel anxious or low, even if it's not actual depression. Not feeling good and judging yourself for that can be really difficult, which is something that I know we all do. We do judge ourselves. And a lot of that does come from the way we've grown up quite often. So you're saying, though, also that you can shift people's perceptions of food because, as we know, at this time, diet is crucial. Looking after our health, both for perimenopause and menopausal symptoms, but also for our longevity and making sure that we do feel as good as we possibly can. So how do you begin to, there is such a realm of, I'm going to use the term disordered eating as a blanket term, or perhaps an uncomfortable relationship with food that many of us have grown up having. Where do you begin unpicking somebody's relationship with food when they know they need to dial it right in at this time?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So again, going back to the body scan. So I talked about it in the respect of understanding how we feel emotionally at any given time. And I think that it's really important to understand that diet culture, how many of us have grown up, has really severed our heads from our bodies. We walk around all in our heads and we find our bodies to be inconvenient and irritating, and we don't want to deal with our bodies. And so, what the technique of the body scan does is it really integrates our heads back into our bodies because our heads and brains are part of our bodies. And so, what I do is I just have my clients check in with themselves like 3 times a day or more often, and have them understand, like, what am I feeling right in this moment? And what that does is, so often for us, we are thinking about the past, we're thinking about the future, and we're not being present. And when you're doing a body scan, when you're checking in with yourself, it is one moment in time that you are actually being present, because you can't actually feel emotions in the future. You can't feel emotions from the past, interestingly enough. So, what it does is it allows you to check in with your body right now and notice, like, what's happening? What is the skin temperature? Like, do I feel a breeze? Do I feel a draft? Am I cold? Am I hot? Am I sweaty? Is my bra digging into the side of my chest? And gosh, I need to throw this bra away because it's the bad one that I haven't thrown away in 3 years. Is my waistband digging in? Like, what is happening in my body? Am I sore? And then also being able to understand hunger signals. And so not just the physical sensations of what's happening physically, but then also what's called interoception, what's happening inside of our bodies. And so really understanding how food makes us feel. And that's actually really super important, because when we can look at how food makes us feel, it completely changes our relationship with food. Because here's why. If you go on a diet and the diet tells you you can't have wine, you go out to dinner with your friends or your partner and they order this beautiful bottle of wine, and you're like, oh, but I'm not supposed to have wine. It's not on the diet. And then you're like, F it. I'm just going to have it because Elizabeth's not here and she's not the boss of me. So I'm going to eat it, or I'm going to drink it. And so you have 1 glass, you have 2 glasses, you have 3 glasses, whatever. It's lovely and you enjoy it. But then that night, you sleep like crap. You wake up the next morning, you're hungover, you don't have any energy because you slept like crap. You start in on the chips or the chocolate or whatever it is because you're having cravings. And you're like, oh, now I've just completely ruined everything. This diet thing just doesn't work. Okay, that's one scenario. The other scenario is really being able to connect the dots between our behaviors and how we feel. So, in that scenario, I empower my clients to be able to eat and drink whatever they want. However, they need to be able to understand how food makes them feel. So, they can have that 1 glass of wine, they can have the 2 glasses. But then once they start seeing the connection that, oh, I can have one glass of wine and sleep okay. It's not as good as if I don't drink wine, but I can drink one glass and be okay. I can drink two glasses, and that's really when my sleep gets disrupted. But then when my sleep gets disrupted, the next day I don't feel well. And then the other thing that happens is that I find that I have cravings and I have a lack of energy the following day. So what then happens is it's not Elizabeth telling someone that they can't have wine, but it's them being at dinner and saying, I can have this wine, but what's going to happen if I do? Do I want to, quote unquote, suffer the consequences of having that second glass of wine? And it really allows them to think about it and consider, oh, I can have this other glass of wine, but I know that these things are going to happen. And so if they do happen, these are the steps that I'm going to take around it. So that's one way that I really help my clients to get off of the food rules and to understand how much of any of those, bad foods, I'm using air quotes, those bad foods that they can have in their diet and still feel good. So there's a threshold that most women will find that I can have some, but I can't have it every single day. And so really being able to look at it not as a diet, but rather as these are the things that help me to feel good.
And understanding how to look after yourself for yourself is something that many of us have to learn at this stage. There's a lot of self-talk and many voices in our heads, which makes me think of one of the things that I really love about one of your podcasts in particular that talks about the board of directors. Can you share with everybody the board of directors and how they work and how we can actually use them to our advantage at this stage of our lives?
Yeah. So the board of directors is not my concept. This is someone else's. I don't even know who to attribute it to, but it's an idea that all of us have a board of directors. Now, for most of you, you have not appointed your board of directors. They have been self-appointed. So if you think about your life, you are the CEO, and then you have people who are on your board of directors who are advising you. Now, for most of you who have not appointed a board of directors, you have your mother, your high school boyfriend, maybe your art teacher from fifth grade who told you that you would never make it as an artist, or someone who told you that you were a terrible singer. And so therefore, it has kept you from being the full person who you are. These people are just, you talked about the inner critic. It's another way that the inner critic is coming out, but we're hearing the voices from all of these other people who are in our past life, who are telling us negative things about ourselves. So I am going to invite you to kick all of those people off of your board of directors. And instead, then I'm going to invite you to think about who do you want to be on your board of directors. So these are the people who are going to advise you. And the question that you'll ask yourself whenever you come to a decision is, what would this person do? So the people who are on your board of directors can be real or imaginary. They can be alive or they can be deceased. It doesn't really matter. But what you're doing is you're kind of getting into the head of this other person. Now, one of the people who is on my board of directors is what I call Chad. Chad is a random middle-aged white dude. He's completely, uh, there's my menopause
Brain
going on
fog.
right now. I can't think of the word. Entitled, thank you. Entitled white man who just is 100% confident. And so one of the things that women are taught is that we need to stay small. We shouldn't go out and do whatever it is that we want for fear that other people are going to judge us. And I'm calling BS on that. And so what I do is I ask myself, if I was Chad, If I was a middle-aged white dude, how would I be thinking about this? So if I wanted to get up on the stage and sing, would Chad do that? Chad would probably do that and not have any second thoughts about it. Chad would totally eat the last brownie on the plate, right? Chad would not make 24 cupcakes for the school PTA just because someone asked. Chad doesn't give two F's about what other people think of them. And so, like, when I think about what it is that I want, if there's any self talk in my head that's like, oh, you shouldn't do that, people are going to think about it, I really use this Chad character as someone on my board of directors because I am the only one who is suffering the consequences of my own decisions. And so, like, going back to Mexico, people had a lot of thoughts about us moving to Mexico because we had the quote unquote American lifestyle. People were like, why would you possibly give that up? We had a beautiful house. We had multiple cars. We had a pool. We had everything that anyone would want, but we still weren't happy. And so moving to Mexico, people were confused because it also threatened their ideas of what we're supposed to do. And for many women in midlife, we've been on this hamster wheel of what other people want us to do. And so many women are all of a sudden having this awakening where we're like, I don't want to do what other people want me to do. I want to do what I want to do. So this board of directors really allows you to tap into what it is that you want and dream and desire of whatever life means for you. Yeah.
I might have to borrow Chad and add him to my
I'm
board
sure
of
you have your
directors.
own Chad.
The flip side of that is ignoring our intuition and allowing still external influences to dictate what we do. When you deny accessing your intuition and following what feels right to you, what repercussions does that have in terms of health?
So I think that actually this is a really important topic because so many of us have learned or grown up to not pay attention to what it is that we really want. And we've used other people's judgments or what we think other people are going to judge us for. I have this recent podcast episode that just came out a few weeks ago was all about good girl syndrome. So needing to be the good mother, the good daughter, the good employee, the good friend. And we have all of these people that we are trying to not disappoint. And what happens is it comes at the expense of whatever it is that we want. So, and that's not to say that we don't get joy from giving to other people. We do. But then what happens is they come to expect it of us. And so we feel like we can't say no. How that shows up is one example might be you're going to a yoga class, and as you're headed out the door, your kid calls you and says, hey, mom, I forgot my band uniform or my clarinet or whatever it is. I need you to bring it to me to school. And so you abandon yourself because you feel this need to serve your child, which I totally get. But then what happens is you're not teaching your child how to be responsible and you're abandoning yourself because now you're not going to make it to yoga and you're probably going to get charged for that yoga class in the same process. So there are two questions that I guide my clients to ask themselves whenever they're making a decision like this. One is, what would I do if I loved myself? Which I think is really powerful because it's not saying I love myself, because a lot of women don't identify with that question, right? But then the other question is, how do I want to show up in this relationship? And so your answer to that might be different. Now, going back to the question of how does it show up in your health? Yes, it shows up by maybe you prioritizing someone else's needs ahead of your own. And so, therefore, you might not have time to food prep or exercise or do the things that you want to do for yourself. So, it gets in the way of self care. But the other side to that, the flip side to that, is also that for many women, we're constantly serving for others and constantly being told that we are not allowed to have pleasure in our lives. We're told that pleasure is a guilty pleasure, that if we have Dove chocolate, for example, that we shouldn't have that, right? Like diet culture is all around you are not allowed to eat these things until you're at some fictional weight that then are allowed to have cake or ice cream or something, but we never allow ourselves to do that. So pleasure is not allowed for women. I mean, think about it. What are all of the things that give us pleasure? There's food, there's sex, there's vacation, there's reading a book. Like we see all of that rest as being pleasure, and like we somehow have to show up and deserve it in order to be able to receive it. And so, what I find with a lot of women is we've done so many things for others that we don't even know what we want anymore. We don't know what kind of music we like. We don't know what our favorite color is. We for sure know that our kids' best friend's favorite color is green, but we don't know that for ourselves. And so, the only thing that brings us pleasure is numbing or buffering habits like eating, like shopping, and all the things that are women related are then demonized and judged. So, like pumpkin spice latte, right? That is something that we judge as being frivolous or bad because it's a teenage girl type of drink. You know, shopping is something that is considered female, right? Oh, my wife, she just like spends all the money in order to make you a beautiful home, right? And so how does abandoning ourselves show up for our health is through these buffering type habits. And so when we can actually allow ourselves to have pleasure, when we can allow ourselves, because here's the other thing that happens is when we are eating the pleasurable thing, at the same time, our brain, our inner critic is telling us, oh, you really shouldn't be eating that. So we're enjoying this pleasurable thing, but at the same time, we're not. And so we eat the next thing because we didn't enjoy the first thing, and we're still seeking that pleasure. And so by allowing ourselves to just have pleasure and be okay with it and not judge it, then what happens is we will more likely have more pleasure in the food, enjoy it, and then not overeat it.
Finding the pleasure in the healthy habits appears to be a challenge for a huge number of people, particularly if you're struggling with perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms and you are constantly being told to eat well, have good, tidy sleep hygiene, move more, move well, do the right movement, look after your mental health, physical health. And it looks to some like a shopping list of misery. And so instantly there is that resistance to, well, I feel like crap. I'm tired. I'm sweaty. I'm itchy. And now you're telling me to do things that are just sound miserable. How can you flip that around for somebody, at least so they can start to take good care of themselves?
Yeah, I think that I'm kind of chuckling because I think that part of it is when we look at the marketing of food and all of the things that are, I'm going to put it in air quotes, bad for us, right? So like staying out late and going to parties and drinking alcohol and things like that, we see that as part of our youth. I think that when we can really get real with ourselves and understand that that part of our life is kind of over. And I hate my answer to this question, but it's the truth. Like, we are no longer 20 years old. All of those things that we used to do had their day and age. And now, here's the thing is I talk to a lot of women about what they want to look like or what they want their aging and longevity to look like. There's a company in the United States called AARP. Do you have AARP? Do you know what it is?
We don't, but I've heard of it.
Okay, it's aging and retirement planning. I forget what the first A is, but when they show commercials, they show all of these gray-haired people who are tanned and up on top of mountains and fit. And so when we think about our older age, we think we want our retirement to be like that picture. You cannot be eating the way that you ate when you were 14 years old, be drinking like you were when you were 20, be sleeping like you were when you had kids, and have that life at the same time. So, do you want to take care of yourself now? Or how do you want your retirement to look? And so it's really being honest with yourself and saying, you know what? I am an adult. I can parent myself. I can take care of myself because I love the future version of myself who is going to exist next week, tomorrow. And I know that that sounds so boring and responsible because it's called adulting, but you are a freaking adult. You can parent yourself. It's okay. And that doesn't mean that it has to be boring. And self-care is really about taking care of the future version of yourself. Now, going back to the two questions that I talked about earlier, when we're thinking about self-care, I really do like those questions again. Like, what would I do if I loved myself? Like, really being able to check in with yourself. Now, what the laundry list of responsibilities that we have to ourselves only seems like a chore because it's things that we have to do on top of all of the other things. So when we can prioritize ourselves into that list and get rid of the stuff that really doesn't matter, then it doesn't feel like as much of a chore. So hopefully I turned that around.
I think you did beautifully. Yes, thank you. Having already moved to Mexico, what does good health and midlife onwards joy look like to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I am a health and life coach, and I am still in the process, I don't want to say of building my business, but I have become so inspired to help other women get out of the people pleasing, the perfectionist, everything that we've been talking about today, changing their relationship with themselves, moving out of the youth and really being able to have that vibrancy of creating the life that they truly want in retirement. And so it's kind of interesting. My husband is actually in a phase of life where he's ready to retire. And I feel like I'm just really ramping up within my calling. And so it's an interesting dynamic between the two of us, as far as, what does the next, 5 years, 10 years look like? I have no idea. But what I can tell you is that I am so inspired to see what's going to happen, because I think that for many women our age, we have the thought, or they have the thought of, I'm too old to do anything new or whatever. And when you look at the lifespan of your potential life, that we are like in the middle, if not like 2/3 the way through. So you have a lot of life left. You can do so much. And so rather than like just thinking about, oh, we're just going to sit at home and watch television and read the newspaper, right? What do you want your retirement and older age to look like? And if it's anything other than what you're doing right now, you can actually create great health in order to sustain and your longevity. Because one thing that we do know is that being active, eating right, getting good sleep, taking care of yourself, it's not necessarily going to prolong your life, but here's what it will do. It will prevent you from having to go into a retirement center as you age. So it'll give you more independence and it'll give you more just autonomy as you age. And who doesn't want that? So hopefully that will allow some listeners to start thinking about visualizing, what do I want my life to look like on the other side of that? Yeah.
Elizabeth, where can people find you?
You can find me on my website at elizabethsherman.com. You can find me on Instagram right now. I'm having fun doing reels. You can find me through the Done with Dieting podcast on Instagram. I also do have a podcast called Done with Dieting, and we talk a lot about the same things that we've been talking about here. And on Facebook, you can find me there at Total Health by Eliz, which is the name of my company.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your time. It's been brilliantly informative.
Thanks for having me. This has been so fun.
I will put all the details of where to find Elizabeth in the show notes. As ever, I always appreciate a review. They've been coming in lately and I really am very grateful. They help people find us and let them know a little bit more of what we're about. I'm very excited for the rest of the season, so I thank you all very much for your continued support and thank you for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.